Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we are going on an incredible journey. We're going to strip away those gold-plated Hollywood myths of pharaohs and magical curses, and instead, we're looking at the structured, gritty reality of ancient Egypt. We'll start right inside the intimate spaces of an everyday Egyptian home, move out into the bustling streets of their society, and travel all the way to the vast, complex logistics of their military machine on the very edge of the empire.
Okay, let's dive right into this. When you picture ancient Egypt, you probably imagine towering pyramids, golden masks, maybe some monumental temples. But what about the ordinary people? What did it actually take to survive just a single day in this ancient world? Well, to answer that, we have to look past the pop culture tropes and really explore the relatable, gritty reality of their daily lives. We're going to piece together the evidence to show you exactly how they lived, how they styled themselves, what they ate, and how they managed to survive the harsh environments of the Nile.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll cover inside the Egyptian home, ancient fashion and beauty, food, trade and society, religion, medicine and magic, the shifting Nile Delta, and finally, the Egyptian military machine. Let's get to it.
Section 1. Inside the Egyptian home. Mud bricks and faience tiles.
Picture this. It's just before dawn, the air is still a bit cool, and you're waking up inside a simple, earthy dwelling. Now, both the rich and the poor lived in houses made of mud bricks that were built very close together. If you were part of the lower classes, your home was pretty basic, just a few small rooms and narrow, high windows to keep out that intense heat. But if you were wealthy, totally different story. You might live in a massive two-story house with plenty of rooms and, remarkably, even indoor bathrooms.
Now, mud bricks sounds a bit drab, right? Well, the Egyptians actually loved color. Enter faience. It's a brightly colored ceramic material that creates these stunning, vibrant shades. They used faience flower tiles to beautifully decorate the door and window frames inside their homes. And before the sun even came up, they relied on simple oil lamps, basically just a bowl with a central hole for oil and a piece of lemon string acting as a wick to produce a flame. It's really fascinating to think about, isn't it? I mean, compare those vibrant ancient tiles and simple linen wick lamps to how we use modern ceramic tiles and LED lights today. The human desire to make our living spaces both functional and beautiful? Yeah, that hasn't changed a bit.
Moving on to Section 2, Ancient Fashion and Beauty, from simple aprons to melting fat cones.
So let's step out of the bedroom and see how the people actually got ready for the day. If we look at the evolution of their clothing, there's a massive contrast over time. In the Old Kingdom, clothes were incredibly practical. Both workers and the early pharaohs wore something called a shenty, which was just a simple linen apron wrapped around the hips. Because the climate was so brutally hot, clothes were seen as something that just got in the way, so people preferred to work with as little on as possible. But fast forward to the New Kingdom, and things had changed drastically. Fashion became exquisite, featuring these long, restrictive, pleated skirts that took enormous amounts of fabric. But what's really cool is that even these lush, layered outfits of the elite were, at the end of the day, just highly styled versions of that original simple apron.
When it came to adorning their bodies, rich or poor, everyone made heavy use of jewelry. We're talking rings, armbands, bracelets, the whole shebang. And look at the hair. The Egyptians actually shaved their heads entirely and wore wigs. These were made of natural hair, twisted sheep's wool, or even ropes, depending on what you could afford. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the historical record shows men actually set the fashion tone much more than women. While women's dresses stayed pretty much a simple, tight-fitting linen shift for centuries, men's fashion rapidly evolved. Men were out there layering multiple aprons and sporting incredibly complex, pleated designs.
But beyond just looking good, these beauty routines were literal climate hacks. That famous heavy, dark eye makeup, that wasn't just for style. It was made from grated malachite. And this sticky, oily paint actually protected their eyes from blowing dust and the glaring African sun. And I want you to imagine the sensory experience of a high-society Egyptian party for a second. To keep cool, they would attach small cones of scented, aromatic animal fat right to the top of their wigs. As the intense sun beat down, those fat cones would slowly melt, sending fragrant, cooling streams of liquid down their heads and bodies. I know, it sounds super messy to us, but for them, it was literally the height of luxury.
Section 3. Food, Trade, and Society. Building the social pyramid.
Okay, so once you were dressed and out of the house, you had to eat and get to work. And the Egyptian diet was surprisingly diverse. They farmed wheat and barley to make their ultimate staples, bread and beer. They ate veggies like peas, beans, cucumbers, and lettuce. And for meat, they enjoyed beef, pork,
geese, and ducks. But naturally, your menu depended entirely on your social standing. The lower classes subsisted on very simple, basic meals, while the upper class got to enjoy a huge selection of food alongside imported luxuries like wine.
And that diet perfectly reflects their strict social hierarchy. At the very top of the social pyramid, you've got the pharaoh, the royal family, nobles, and government officials. Just below them were the priests, scribes, artists, and highly skilled craftsmen. But holding that entire structure up, making up the vast, massive foundation of the pyramid, were the laborers and the farmers. They were the ones out there spending long, grueling days in the fields producing the grain that literally fueled the empire.
Section 4. Religion, Medicine, and Magic. Blending Science and Mysticism.
So, let's explore what happened when these people faced illness or an injury. The Egyptians were incredibly observant. Their doctors used practical, hands-on treatments, applying parts of plants and herbs, like garlic actually, straight to wounds. They knew exactly how to treat external injuries, skillfully using bandages and stitches to close cuts. But, and this is a big but, their anatomical knowledge had hard limits. Crucially, they did not perform internal surgery to cure diseases.
So the crucial point is, what do you do when practical, plant-based medicine stops working? Or for highly dangerous, unpredictable events like pregnancy and childbirth? Well, they didn't just throw their hands up. They seamlessly shifted over to mysticism. They relied heavily on magicians to treat illnesses, using spells and incantations right alongside their herbal bandages. To them, magic and medicine were quite literally two sides of the exact same coin. And this fascinating blend of practical science and magical belief extended directly into the afterlife. They firmly believed they needed to preserve the physical body in order for the soul to survive. But again, social class dictated everything here. The poorest folks were simply wrapped in discarded clothing and buried directly in the hot desert sand, which, honestly, naturally dried them out pretty well. The wealthy, however, paid for elaborate mummification processes and were placed in tombs surrounded by everyday items. Meanwhile, pharaohs had massive, elaborate funerals to send them off to face the judgment of gods like Osiris and Anubis.
Section 5. The Shifting Nile Delta, a landscape in constant motion.
Zooming out for a second, all of this human activity happened on a landscape that was incredibly dynamic. Between 4000 and 3000 BCE, the geography that dictated where these mud brick homes and temples could even be built was in constant motion. During the transition to the Holocene, get this, the Mediterranean Sea was actually up to 50 kilometers further inland than it is today. The Nile River didn't just flow straight into the sea like a highway. It split into multiple shifting branches, creating these complex lagoons and marshes that literally altered the map of the empire century by century. It was like a giant puzzle.
Living and navigating in this environment was incredibly tough. The eastern waterways suffered from high salinity because salt was leaching from the soils and seawater was mixing in. On top of that, high winds caused massive evaporation. And this brilliantly illustrates why archaeologists have such a terribly hard time finding ancient Egyptian naval bases today. Active Mediterranean coastal erosion and a strong counterclockwise sea current have literally washed away the ancient coastlines. The very ground the empire was built on was constantly being eaten by the sea.
Finally, Section 6, the Egyptian military machine, logistics, warfare, and propaganda.
So to protect this shifting land and expand their wealth, the Egyptians obviously required a massive, highly organized military. But first, they had to motivate their people. Listen to this quote from an ancient text called The Instruction of Merikare. "The vile Asiatic is the pain of the place where he is. He does not announce the day of battle. The Asiatic is a crocodile on its riverbank." Wow! I mean, this is pure ancient state propaganda. The Egyptian state constantly portrayed their Levantine enemies as deceitful, cowardly, and dangerous. Why? To boost their own military morale and justify their brutal campaigns abroad.
But the gritty reality on the ground, it was far less glamorous than the pharaoh's propaganda. Modern analysis completely refutes the myth that the Egyptians had superior weapons. During the New Kingdom, there was an internationalism of arms across the Near East. Basically, everyone had the exact same technology. Furthermore, the average Egyptian conscript marching across the blazing desert was likely malnourished, hungry, and exhausted. So, how did they dominate for so long? Logistics. They were absolute masters of supply chains.
For example, to keep their troops hydrated, they mass-produced clay beer jars. They figured out that adding straw temper to the clay enhanced its plasticity, allowed it to dry evenly using way less fuel and conserved raw materials. It wasn't magic swords that won the day. It was the sheer genius of mass-producing cheap, reliable beer jars to keep thousands of tired, hungry men moving forward.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today. We've gone from the simple mud brick homes with colorful faience tiles all the way to the melting fat cones of elite parties, right out to the exhausted soldiers drinking beer from straw-tempered jars on the shifting sands of the Delta. It's a lot to take in, and it leaves us with this final thought. How does uncovering the gritty, everyday reality of an ancient empire change the way we view our own daily struggles and grand ambitions? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the myths, and I'll catch you next time.